Welcome to Soltron. Today we're going to go over pretty much every add-on kit for Siege Jetfire. And at the end I'm going to tell you what my plans are for this figure for customizing. Okay, let's get a 360 look at this guy, and you can see these are the Shockwave lab, like the missile pack. And then, I don't remember who makes this, but you got like the UN Spacey, Gunpod. You also got the second edition of the laser sword. And you can see, I think all of these accessories really just make him look really awesome. And you got the Matrix Workshop antennas on his head as well. So this guy already has he's already got 4 upgrades on him as is. Okay, let's start with the one that is maybe the most eye-catching, which I think are these missile pods. So you can see they're all on these adjustable wires, which do a good job of simulating smoke. So you can get some really cool like smoke trail heat-seeking effects from these things. They're, of course, very posable. So I think this set was like $15 on eBay, which I think is a great deal. And then you get the missile pod themselves. And you can see how this works. Basically, you just slot in the metal wires into the missile pods themselves. And then a nice thing that these missile pods do is they have a 5mm post and they have a 5mm port. So they do both. But you can see, you get this really cool look. It's kind of unfortunate that these don't come out because these look like the missiles when they're not being fired. And this would be like the open-ended firing end. But if we just disassemble this, you can see everything comes basically right out. The wire is kind of surrounded by this vinyl thing, like this vinyl coating, which can make it really hard to slide the missiles in, but this is like a close-up of one of the missiles, and you can see the details are very nicely done. It's kind of a hexagonal shape, which is very odd, but it looks cool. It definitely looks like it gets the job done. And you get these thruster bits. And I think the entire kit is made of kind of a hard rubber, which is not my favorite thing in the world. I definitely prefer plastic. So they do have like some good flex to them, unfortunately. But the paint I think is top tier. It's very sharp looking, and the paint on, there's even some paint on the flame effect as well. There's a little bit of white smoke in there as well. So it's really well done, and you can see you could just pull off the missile, and then the flame effect is basically just a tube. And then when you first get it, you have to slide all these flame effects onto the wire, which can be very difficult. Some of them fit much better than others. And then you're going to put the missile on right at the end. So for 3 of these, I had to drill them out because they just would not fit. So pro tip, once you get the flame and missile on there, don't take them off again because they can be very difficult to get back on. But yeah, for the most part, they're well fitted, but you probably will need to use a hair dryer or something just to loosen up the flame effect. That's the part that's really hard to get on. And then everything pegs pretty easily into these slots. And these aren't 5mm ports, they're more like 3mm. But everything pegs nicely into there. And this is what the pod looks like when it's emptied out. So when it's not firing, you'd want to have this side facing forward, which is where the warheads are ready to go. But yeah, pretty good set. And you can, of course, equip that into any 5mm ports. You can put that onto his forearm. Theoretically, it doesn't really want to work with that upgrade kit. But with the natural 5mm ports, it goes in just fine. So that's pretty cool. Okay, and there he is with his missile pods on his forearms. You can, of course, use this peg back here if you want them to sit higher up. I was using this port right there. And then, of course, you can have them on his cabs if you like that look. So yeah, it would be I think it'd actually be pretty awesome to just have maybe 3 sets of these and just put it on his forearms, his calves, and his back. Would be some awesome looking overkill. Okay, so that's the first kit, the Shockwave Labs missile pods. Highly recommend. I'll leave a link in the description. Even if you don't have Jetfire, it'd be good for other figures as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. So let's do the really simple one, just this Matrix Workshop head antenna. Nothing too special here. It uses some friction, and it's got a couple, it's kind of hard to see. It's got a couple little tabs that help hold it right here under his natural antenna. And I think his head just looks very naked without them. And then you can see that it's 3D printed. You can see some of the layering, but it's not too bad. The paint job is very nice. I've taken these on and off a few times, and there's no like white color underneath that's showing up. And I did scrape some off. It is white. So this was about $7, which is a little pricey for all of what it is. This is all it does. It would be nice if they could rotate forward or back. That would definitely increase the value in my mind by a bit. But yeah, $7, it's okay. It's up to you. I think this completes the look of his helmet. His helmet just doesn't look right without it, personally. I just don't like the way it looks regardless, because I think they tried to mold in those details here, but they just did a very bad job. These should have been bigger and rotatable. But yeah, this fixes that. Gives him a nice set of cool looking earmuffs. So let's move on to the next easy one. And then I've been disassembling this guy, so he's going to have some issues with his arms. Don't mind that. But you get this nice laser blade. This is the second edition of the laser blade. So this is looking pretty good. You can see it's just like 3D printed, and then it's got this little slot here. So it's really not gonna, it's not really meant to come apart. You could force it by getting it off this peg and then pull it back out. I don't really want to do that, but it's got a couple little streaks in it, but for the most part, it's quite clean. So it looks like this was just a clear filament, and then they brushed on some clear blue on it, which worked out quite nicely. So pretty good arm blade. Then the nice thing about this edition of the arm blade is it is compatible with his forearm guns, so you can peg those on pretty easily without any issue. So this is the second run of these laser blades. This is the first edition. You can see that the sculpting detail is very different. This has got a lot more layering, but it is in white filament, whereas this one is probably in white, and then they sprayed painted it with a white spray paint to go over it. I think the detail work on the original is maybe a little bit better, but then it's got these kind of useless 5mm ports that actually are too shallow to hold anything. So they're just there. They don't work unless you drilled them out. So this edition is better because you can actually use these 5mm ports where these are not usable. And then you can see the blade itself has a lot of layering on it, whereas the new edition is just much cleaner. I actually prefer this one, though this one's not too bad looking either if you're in a pinch. And then the other ugly thing about this is it's flat on one side, and then it has the beveling on the other side. This one has beveling on both sides, so it makes sense either way. So yeah, the new edition is definitely the way to go. But one nice thing about these ones is you can just pull out the laser blade, so you can just have these like by default onto his forearm, so it just looks like his forearm, and then the blade just appears, which is very cool. I do actually like that this blade is removable and it doesn't really hurt the stability of it. And then it looks like the patterning on this matches his forearms much better than this. This is just like generic greebling. It doesn't match this at all. So that's something else to consider. But yeah, I think the downside of this is that the blade doesn't come out for like storage, so he can just look like he has a normal forearm. Oh, and actually all my wiggling around actually did. So this is just glued in place, and I did disassemble the glue because I kept messing with it. So you can see some of that underlying color. It's kind of a pale white, like translucent white. So yeah, I guess now I can just use this as his forearm. But then again, a disadvantage of this is you can't just slot this in. You have to take the whole thing off and then peg it back in, and then you can put it back on his forearm. So it's hard to say. I'd say that visually this one's worse, but this one has better play value. This one just looks a lot better. But yeah, so that's the arm blades. And then the final upgrade kit that I bought was, oh yeah, and this arm blade was $15 after shipping. I think these ones are probably a little bit cheaper, as you could tell by looking at them. So yeah, this is a lot of money, especially if I was going to buy two of them. That's pretty expensive. And then finally, he's got this Shockwave Labs Gunpod, and it clearly says UN Spacey in it. Very nice nod back to the Macross figure that was the original Jetfire, and he's like, this cannon is enormous. He's got the articulation that he can hold it two-handed and look pretty convincing. For the most part, his chest is a little wide, so it's going to be hard to get a good two-handed pose out of it. But yeah, from the side, that looks pretty good. And then if you wanted to have him like facing front and shooting it, it's pretty heavy, but he can do that, but he can't reach over his chest, so there's no way he's going to two-hand this while aiming it forward. But you can still get some convincing looking, I guess, like a sort of looks like he's fighting with it. But yeah, pretty great gun. This one's 3D printed, so it's not made out of a rubbery material this time. And it does come in two parts. So he's got a 5mm handle here. They even bolted, or they even pinned that into place, so you're not gonna have to worry about that coming off for some reason. And then you can do this really weird thing that's kind of hard. It's got a lot of friction to it. Let me try this again. Okay, so you can slide off the entire gun barrel and you can just have like this smaller configuration, or maybe this is like how they reload. They have to replace the gun barrel. I never watched Macross, so I'm not sure. But you get pretty excellent, very well detailed gun pieces. Everything feels nice. I think it's 3D printed, but you can't even really tell. And then it's very hollow on the inside. If you wanted to put like an LED in there, it'd be very easy. And then you get this giant barrel, which just feels like a really thick marker or something. But yeah, and then these two pieces just slide back together. I guess you could like pretend to like load a little shell in here. Maybe you can put one of the Shockwave Lab missiles in here. Yeah, that fits in here. And then you can like have it come out of the end, I guess. You can pretend he's firing this thing. But yeah, pretty cool. Doesn't necessarily need to be in two pieces. I don't know what the point is, but I think that does kind of add the value a little bit. And this was also $15. I think that's more reasonable than this being $15. This is just so much more bulk. I could see why this makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, and then you can have the firing effects. Pretty sure it's blast effect compatible. Okay, yep, so there's the blast effect pushed into the nozzle there. So I'm going to go ahead and armor him up and then put all his effect parts on him and see how you like that. All right, and here he is, like fully armored up with all the weapon packs. And yeah, that's pretty intimidating looking, I think. Yeah, I think that's pretty great. Oh yeah, I forgot, I have one more accessory. He's got this mask. I don't know who the manufacturer of this is, but I guess If you just want a totally different look for him, there's this helmet, which makes him look more like a Decepticon, I think. I don't think it comes colored that way. I think the person who sold me this painted it themselves, maybe. But yeah, so it gives him more of a Decepticon look, which I think looks good with this chest armor, brings out more of these black colors. But yeah, now to get him into vehicle mode. All right, and here he is with all his missiles firing off, and yeah, that looks so cool. And then he's got the Gunpod pegged on the top, which is another thing you could do if you need to peg it on his back. There's not a place on the bottom for it to peg in, unfortunately, because that would have looked, I think, a lot better, but it's just not really possible. But yeah, he looks really great, and the wires are firm enough that you can move him around, fly him around while he's firing all these missiles. But yeah, so highly recommend the Shockwave Lab. Both of those add-ons. I actually love these little antennae, even though they're a little overpriced. And of course, the laser blade. Really like the second edition one. So recommend those ones. I'll leave links in the descriptions. And before I leave, I'll show you what I'm planning to do with this guy. All right, now that we're back in robot mode, did you know that his backpack is only held on by these 3 screws? All right, so that's this whole thing taken off. And I think that looks a lot more like his G1 self, but we can also do another interesting thing. We can swap out his hips, because I think the back of his leg is actually more interesting than the front of his legs. All right, I like that look. I think his thighs look thinner this way, and it makes him look a little bit more sleek, but now his shoulders are like too wide, so we can fix that as well. So I already disassembled all that. And now he can look more like this. And I've already taken off his hip skirts too, just to slim him up a little bit more. And I think that looks a lot like the G1 figure, which is kind of what I'm going for. So yeah, I'm going to be customizing this and just streamlining his alt mode and everything. And if I have to, I'll make this into like fast packs instead of a giant backpack. But yeah, I think with the paint, I think this will look really good, a lot like the G1 figure. Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.